Hello, my dear students. Welcome back to another exciting story session. Today, I want to share something very special with you. It's not just any story, it's my story about learning English. Yes, the journey you're on right now, I've been on that path too. When I first started learning English, I didn't know where to begin. I remember feeling nervous and even a little scared. I would look at English words and think, how will I ever understand this language? But let me tell you, every expert was once a beginner. We all start somewhere, and that's the beauty of learning. Why am I sharing my story with you today? Because I want you to know that you're not alone. Learning a language can feel hard sometimes, but with patience, practice, and a positive attitude, you can achieve your goals. My journey wasn't perfect. It was full of mistakes, funny moments, and little victories. And that's what makes it so memorable. So, sit back, relax, and listen carefully as I take you through my English learning journey. I hope my story inspires you and gives you some helpful tips to improve your English. Ready? Let's get started. When I first started learning English, I remember feeling so unsure of myself. It felt like I was standing at the bottom of a huge mountain, looking up and wondering how I would ever reach the top. English was everywhere, in books, on TV, in songs, and it sounded beautiful to me, but it also felt impossible to understand. The first time I saw an English book, I was so curious. I opened it and saw all these words that I didn't know. Some words were long, some were short, but all of them felt like they belonged to a secret code that I couldn't break. I thought to myself, how do people read this? How do they make sense of all these letters and sounds? I felt excited, but also a little overwhelmed. I still remember my first English lesson. The teacher walked in and greeted us with a big smile, saying, "Good morning." Everyone in the class just stared at her, confused. At that moment, I realized I didn't even know how to respond. Should I say something? Should I smile back? It was such a simple thing, but it made me feel nervous. I thought, how will I ever learn this language if I don't even know how to say hello properly? The sounds of English were another challenge. Words like think, through, and thought felt so strange on my tongue. I would try to repeat them, but they came out sounding funny. I laughed at myself a lot, but deep down, I worried. What if I never got it right? What if people laughed at me too? I also remember feeling shy to speak. I was so scared of making mistakes that I didn't want to say anything at all. In my mind, I kept thinking, what if I say the wrong word? What if I sound silly? It felt safer to stay quiet and just listen. But at the same time, I knew that if I didn't try, I wouldn't learn. Another thing I felt was confusion. English grammar seemed like a puzzle with so many rules. Why do we say I am, but you are? Why do some words have ing at the end? I had so many questions, and sometimes the answers only made me more confused. It felt like I was learning a completely new way of thinking. But even with all these feelings, nervousness, fear, and confusion, there was also a sense of excitement. I knew that learning English could open so many doors for me. I dreamed of reading books, watching movies without subtitles, and talking to people from all over the world. That dream kept me going, even on the days when I felt stuck. So, my starting point was full of mixed emotions. I was scared, curious, confused, and excited all at the same time. But looking back, I realize that it's okay to feel all those things when you're learning something new. It's part of the process. And you know what? Those feelings didn't stop me. They motivated me to keep going. That's how my journey began. With a little fear, a lot of questions, and a big dream. And that's what I want you to remember. It's okay to feel unsure when you're starting out. The important thing is to take that first step, no matter how small it may seem. When I finally decided to start learning English, I knew I had to begin with something small, something that wouldn't overwhelm me. The first step I took was learning a few basic words. I remember thinking, I don't need to know everything right now. I just need to know how to say a few important things. So, I started with simple words like hello, goodbye, thank you, and sorry. I practiced saying them every day until they felt natural to me. At first, I would stand in front of a mirror and say these words out loud. It felt strange, and I was a little embarrassed, even though I was alone. But I kept doing it because I wanted to hear how the words sounded when I said them. I thought, if I can say these small words with confidence, I can say bigger words later. My next step was learning the alphabet. I knew I couldn't read or write in English without knowing the letters. I remember writing the letters over and over again in a notebook. I would say them out loud as I wrote them. A, B, C. It was repetitive, but it helped me remember. And once I was comfortable with the alphabet, I started combining the letters to form small words like cat, dog, and sun. It felt like solving a puzzle, and every time I figured out a new word, I felt proud of myself. One of the best tools I used in my early days was flashcards. I made them myself using small pieces of paper. On one side, I wrote the English word, and on the other side, I drew a picture of what it meant. For example, I would write apple on one side and draw a red apple on the other. I carried these cards with me everywhere. If I had a free moment, I would take them out and practice. It was a simple but effective way to learn new vocabulary. Listening was another important step for me. At the time, I didn't have access to many resources, but I did have a radio. I found an English station and started listening to it every day. I couldn't understand most of what they were saying, but I paid attention to the sounds and rhythm of the language. It felt like I was training my ears to get used to English. I would pick out words I recognized and try to guess what they were talking about. I also tried to watch TV shows and cartoons in English. Cartoons were especially helpful because the language was simple, and the characters often used gestures to show what they meant. I remember watching a cartoon character say, "I'm hungry," while pointing to his stomach. That's how I learned what hungry means. Writing was another step I took. I started keeping a small notebook where I wrote down every new word I learned. At first, I only wrote single words, but over time I started writing simple sentences. I remember writing things like, "I like apples," or "It is sunny." They were basic sentences, but they gave me the confidence to keep practicing. I also practiced speaking whenever I could. If I learned a new word, I would try to use it right away, even if it was just talking to myself. I would say things like, "It's a nice day," or "I am happy." It felt awkward, but it helped me build confidence. One of the most important steps I took was making a routine. I decided to spend at least 15 minutes every day practicing English. Sometimes I would read, sometimes I would write, and other times I would just listen to something in English. It wasn't a lot of time, but it added up. Little by little, I started to notice progress. Looking back, those first steps were small, but they were so important. They built the foundation for everything I know now. The key was to start simple, stay consistent, and not worry about being perfect. And that's what I want you to remember. Start with small steps, and you'll go far. When I started learning English, the challenges came almost immediately. The first and biggest challenge was understanding the language itself. English sounded so different from my native language. The pronunciation was tricky, the words seemed strange, and the rules were confusing. I remember hearing words like enough or thought and wondering, why don't they sound the way they're spelled? The silent letters in English felt like a mystery I couldn't solve. Speaking was another big challenge for me. I was so afraid of making mistakes that I hesitated to open my mouth. What if I said something wrong? What if people laughed at me? These thoughts were always in the back of my mind. I remember once trying to say, "Thank you," to someone, but I mispronounced it so badly that they looked confused. I felt so embarrassed, and for a while, I avoided speaking English altogether. Listening was equally tough. Native speakers talked so fast. It felt like they weren't using spaces between their words. I would hear a sentence, and it would sound like one long, jumbled word. I'd try to catch individual words, but by the time I understood one, the speaker was already on to the next sentence. I often felt lost and frustrated. Reading was also a struggle. English has so many rules and exceptions to those rules that it felt impossible to keep track. Why does cat rhyme with bat, but put doesn't rhyme with but? Why does the letter C sound like a K in cat, but like an S in city? These inconsistencies confused me so much. Sometimes I would read a sentence and not understand a single word, even if I had seen those words before. Grammar was another mountain to climb. Words like am, is, and are were confusing at first. Why do we say, "I am," but "you are"? And then there were the tenses. I had to learn when to say, "I eat," "I am eating," "I ate," and "I have eaten." It felt overwhelming to remember all these rules. I often mixed up tenses and ended up saying sentences that didn't make sense. One of the most challenging things was staying motivated. Learning a language takes time, and progress can be very slow. There were days when I felt like I wasn't improving at all. I would practice and practice, but when I tried to use what I'd learned, I still made mistakes. I started doubting myself. Maybe I'm just not good at learning languages, I thought. Finding resources was another difficulty. At the time, I didn't have access to many English books, and the internet wasn't as full of resources as it is now. I had to rely on whatever I could find, sometimes just old magazines or borrowed books. I didn't have anyone to practice speaking with either, so I often felt like I was learning in isolation. Another challenge was feeling judged. Sometimes, when I tried to speak English, people would laugh or correct me in a way that felt discouraging. Even though I knew they didn't mean to hurt me, it made me feel self-conscious. It's hard to keep trying when you feel like people are watching your every mistake. There were even moments when I felt like giving up. I remember one day when I had been practicing a sentence over and over. I thought I had it perfect, but when I said it out loud, the person I was talking to didn't understand me. I felt so frustrated. I thought, what's the point? Why am I even trying if I'm not getting anywhere? But despite all these challenges, I didn't stop. I realized that every struggle was teaching me something. Every mistake I made helped me learn. Yes, it was hard. And yes, there were moments when I felt like I couldn't do it. But I reminded myself why I started. Because I wanted to connect with the world, learn new things, and grow as a person. Looking back, I see that those challenges weren't roadblocks. They were stepping stones. They made me stronger, more determined, and more patient with myself. And now, I can share this story with you to let you know that challenges are a natural part of learning. They aren't there to stop you. They're there to help you grow. When I started facing all those challenges in learning English, I knew I needed to find ways to overcome them. I realized that just wishing to get better wasn't enough. I had to put in consistent effort and use smart strategies to improve. Let me share with you the methods and techniques that worked for me, step by step. 1. Building vocabulary. Little by little, I knew that learning new words was essential. I didn't try to memorize hundreds of words all at once. Instead, I started small. Every day, I learned 5 new words. I wrote each word in a notebook along with its meaning and an example sentence. For example, if the word was beautiful, I wrote, "The sunset is beautiful." But I didn't stop there. I tried to use those words in my daily life. If I learned the word delicious, I would say it every time I ate something tasty. This habit made the words stick in my memory. 2. Listening to English daily. Listening was one of the hardest parts for me, so I decided to make it part of my daily routine. At first, I listened to simple things, like cartoons and children's shows. These programs used basic language and spoke slowly, which made it easier for me to understand. I also started listening to English songs. I would play my favorite songs and look up the lyrics. Then, I sang along, trying to match the pronunciation. It felt more like fun than studying, but it helped me a lot. Over time, I noticed I could pick out words and phrases even in fast conversations. 3. Practicing speaking. Every day, speaking was the most challenging part for me because I was so shy. But I told myself, if I want to get better, I have to speak, even if I make mistakes. So, I started talking to myself in English. I would describe what I was doing, like, I am brushing my teeth, or I am going to the market. I also practiced in front of a mirror. I would imagine I was talking to someone else. This helped me feel more confident and get used to hearing my own voice in English. Later, I found a speaking partner, a friend who was also learning English. We practiced together, helping each other with pronunciation and correcting mistakes. It wasn't perfect, but it was a safe space to learn without fear of judgment. 4. Reading every day. Reading was one of the most effective ways I improved my English. I started with simple books, like children's stories, because they had easy words and lots of pictures. I would read slowly, and if I didn't understand a word, I would try to guess its meaning from the context. I also kept a dictionary nearby. Whenever I found a new word, I wrote it down and looked up its meaning later. I didn't just memorize the definition, I also learned how to use the word in a sentence. Over time, I moved on to more challenging materials like newspapers, magazines, and novels. Reading not only improved my vocabulary, but also helped me understand grammar and sentence structure. 5. Writing to practice grammar. To improve my grammar, I started writing short paragraphs every day. At first, I wrote about simple topics, like what I did that day or what I liked to eat. For example, I wrote sentences like, "Today, I went to the market. I bought apples. They were red and sweet." As I learned more, I started writing longer sentences and using different tenses. I would write, "Yesterday, I watched a movie. It was very funny." Writing helped me understand how to form sentences correctly and use new grammar rules in real life. 6. Using flashcards. Flashcards became one of my favorite tools. I made them myself using small pieces of paper. On one side, I wrote the English word, and on the other side, I wrote its meaning or drew a picture. For example, I wrote dog on one side and drew a picture of a dog on the other. I carried the flashcards with me everywhere. If I had a few minutes, on a bus, during a break, or before bed, I would pull them out and practice. This constant repetition helped me remember new words. 7. Imitating native speakers. One strategy that worked wonders for my pronunciation was imitation. I would listen to native speakers on TV, in songs, or on the radio, and then I would try to copy how they spoke. I paid close attention to their accent, intonation, and rhythm. Sometimes I would pause a sentence, repeat it, and then play it again to see if I got it right. It felt a bit awkward at first, but it made a big difference in how I spoke. Setting small goals, I realized that setting big goals, like "I want to be fluent in English," was too overwhelming. Instead, I set small, achievable goals. For example, one week I focused on learning how to introduce myself. The next week, I practiced asking questions like, "What is your name?" and "Where are you from?" These small goals kept me motivated because I could see my progress step by step. 9. Learning from mistakes. One of the most important strategies I used was learning from my mistakes. At first, I was so afraid of being wrong that I avoided speaking or writing. But over time, I realized that mistakes are part of the process. If someone corrected me, I didn't feel bad. I felt grateful. Every mistake taught me something new, and I knew that with each correction, I was getting better. 10. Staying consistent. Finally, the most important strategy was staying consistent. I made English a part of my daily life. I practiced every day, even if it was just for 15 minutes. Some days were easier than others, but I never stopped. Consistency is what turns small efforts into big results. Step by step, I built my skills, and the more I practiced, the more confident I became. These strategies may sound simple, but they were incredibly powerful for me. I hope you'll try some of them in your own learning journey. Remember, there's no one perfect way to learn English. Find what works for you and stick with it. Progress. Share the moment you realized you were getting better. There was a moment in my English learning journey when everything suddenly clicked. It wasn't a big, dramatic event, but it was a quiet, life-changing realization. I'll never forget it. It wasn't the first time I got a word right, and it wasn't when I mastered a difficult grammar rule. It was something much smaller, yet so significant. I had been practicing for months, reading, listening, writing, speaking, and I had improved. But I didn't fully realize it until one day when I was having a simple conversation. I had been meeting a friend at a cafe, and as we were talking, something amazing happened. I realized I was speaking English without thinking about it. At first, I didn't even notice. We were talking about something completely ordinary, maybe the weather or a new movie, and I was sharing my thoughts naturally, without pausing to search for words or worry about grammar. My mind wasn't filled with doubts or fears about making mistakes. I just spoke, and the words came out smoothly. And then it hit me. I'm speaking in English, and I understand everything. I had reached a point where it wasn't about struggling to translate each sentence in my head. It wasn't about looking for the perfect word before speaking. I was just having a real conversation in English. I understood everything my friend was saying, and I could respond easily, without stress. This was the moment I realized I had made progress. All the hours of practice, all the times I felt frustrated and stuck, had paid off. It wasn't about perfection. It was about being able to communicate, to share ideas and opinions, and to connect with others in a way I couldn't before. Before that day, I had always been so focused on the process of learning, on memorizing words, improving my grammar, and practicing speaking. But that day, I understood that learning English wasn't just about knowing the rules, it was about using what I had learned to connect with the world. But the journey didn't stop there. As I continued practicing, I started noticing other signs of progress. For example, I remember watching a movie in English one evening. A few months earlier, I had struggled to understand even a few sentences, but now I was able to follow the whole story without subtitles. I could understand most of what the characters were saying, and I could even laugh at the jokes. I realized how much more comfortable I had become with the language. Another turning point came when I started reading books in English. At first, I had to look up nearly every word, and I could only read a few pages before feeling exhausted. But now, I could read entire chapters, and even though I still didn't know every word, I understood enough to enjoy the story. My reading speed had improved, and I no longer felt frustrated or lost. I was actually reading for pleasure. Then, there was a time when I was speaking to someone who was a native English speaker. They spoke quickly, using idioms and slang, and I found myself understanding everything. At one point, the person stopped mid-sentence and said, "Wait, you speak really well for someone learning English." That moment felt like a victory. It was the first time someone had recognized my progress in such a natural way. I had become the kind of person who could be understood without much effort, and that was a huge accomplishment. But progress wasn't always so obvious. There were times when I still doubted myself. Even after all that improvement, I would have moments when I made mistakes or couldn't find the right word. I would get frustrated, but then I would remind myself of how far I had come. The key was to look at the small wins. For example, I started noticing that I could think in English. Before, I would think in my native language and translate into English. But now, I found myself forming thoughts directly in English. This felt like a huge leap. I also remember the time when I helped someone else learn English. It wasn't much, a simple explanation of a grammar rule, but I felt so proud to be able to teach what I had learned. It showed me that I had not only gained knowledge, but I had also internalized it. I had become a learner who could share their learning with others. As I reflected on all these moments, I realized that my progress had come from consistency, practice, and a willingness to make mistakes. I didn't need to be perfect to be good at English. It was the small moments of success, like understanding a joke in a movie, reading a chapter of a book, or having a smooth conversation, that proved how far I had come. This is something I want you to remember. Progress isn't always obvious, but it's happening. You might not notice it at first, but little by little, you're improving. Don't wait for one big moment of success. Look for the small wins, because they add up over time. The fact that you can read a sentence in English or understand a word you didn't know before is progress. And as you continue to practice, the moments when you realize how much you've improved will come more and more often. When I finally realized I was getting better, I felt proud, but I also felt excited. The journey wasn't over, and I knew that every day of learning would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to grow. So, if you're reading this and you're feeling discouraged or unsure about your progress, remember this: the moment when you realize you're getting better is coming. Keep practicing. Keep pushing yourself. And one day, you'll look back and realize just how far you've come. As I sit here today, reflecting on everything I've learned, the progress I've made, and the challenges I've faced in my English learning journey, I want to leave you with some words of encouragement. I know how difficult it can be at times, how it feels when you make mistakes, how slow progress can seem, and how frustrating it is when you feel like you're not improving fast enough. But let me tell you something that I wish I had known when I first started. You are doing better than you think. When you first begin learning something new, it's easy to get discouraged. You might feel like you're not making any progress, or you might think that other people are learning faster than you. You may compare yourself to others and think, "Why can't I speak like them yet?" But here's the thing: everyone's journey is different. Just because someone else seems to be moving faster doesn't mean you're not on the right path. Your pace is yours, and that's okay. I want you to remember that learning English is not a race. It's a journey. And just like any journey, It's full of steps, some easy, some difficult, but all important. Every small step you take is progress. Don't overlook the small wins. The fact that you can now understand a simple sentence or say a few words confidently is a huge achievement. These are the building blocks that will take you further. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. In fact, embrace them. When you make a mistake, it means you're trying. It means you're learning. Some of my biggest breakthroughs came when I made a mistake and someone gently corrected me. At first, it was uncomfortable, but over time, I realized that every correction was an opportunity to learn. Remember, no one learns anything without making mistakes. Mistakes are not failures. They are stepping stones to success. Perseverance is key. There were many times when I wanted to give up. I felt frustrated. I felt like I wasn't improving, and I thought maybe it wasn't worth it. But I didn't give up. I pushed through the difficult days, and eventually, I saw the results. So when you feel like you're stuck or you've hit a wall, don't quit. Take a break if you need to, but keep going. Progress will come, even when it feels slow. And one day, you'll look back and be amazed at how far you've come. Sometimes, it's easy to focus on what you don't know yet, on the vocabulary you haven't learned, the grammar rules you can't remember, the words you can't pronounce correctly. But I want you to focus on what you can do. Celebrate the progress you've made so far. You're learning a new language, and that is already an incredible accomplishment. Every time you speak, every time you read, every time you write in English, you are building your skills, even if it doesn't feel like it. Every single day that you practice is another step toward becoming more fluent, more confident, and more connected with the world around you. Another important piece of advice is to stay consistent. There's no magic formula that will make you fluent overnight. It takes consistent effort. But I promise you, even if you practice for just 15 minutes a day, you will see improvement over time. Learning English is about making it a part of your daily life, little by little. Some days might feel harder than others, and that's okay. Just keep showing up, even on the tough days. It's also important to find joy in the process. Learning English shouldn't feel like a chore. It should be something that excites you. So find ways to make it fun. Watch movies you love in English, listen to music, or read books that interest you. Play games, talk to friends, or write in a journal. The more you make English a part of your everyday life in enjoyable ways, the more you'll look forward to practicing. One thing that really helped me stay motivated was having a clear goal. I had a vision of what I wanted to achieve, and that kept me going. Maybe your goal is to travel the world and be able to talk to people from different countries. Maybe you want to pass an English exam, or you want to improve your career prospects. Whatever your goal is, keep it in your mind and remind yourself of it often. When the going gets tough, think about why you started. Your goal is worth the effort. And remember that you are capable. When I first started, I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I was good enough or smart enough to learn a new language. But over time, I realized that anyone can learn English if they're willing to put in the work. You have the ability to learn, grow, and improve. Believe in yourself, because you are more capable than you think. Support is important too. Surround yourself with people who encourage you, whether they are teachers, friends, or other learners. Find a community of people who are on the same journey as you. Share your experiences, learn from each other, and celebrate each other's successes. You don't have to do this alone. Finally, never forget that the process of learning English is not just about the language. It's about opening doors to new experiences, new friendships, and new opportunities. It's about broadening your horizons and connecting with the world. Every step you take brings you closer to understanding and experiencing the world in a way you never could before. So keep going, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself. The journey may not always be easy, but it is worth it. I am so proud of you for starting this journey. Keep going, and I promise you will see amazing progress. You've got this. You can do it.